According to market mix modeling, audio ads are 3.5 times more effective if they use stats, like 3.5 times.
Market mix modelling knows that everything is measurable. Right now, we are tracking your pupil dilation, galvanic skin response, and general levels of arousal, and determining the effectiveness of this ad.
Or if you want to get serious about measuring effectiveness, talk to Mutinex. They're the world's leading SaaS provider of market mix modeling. Marketers, think of it as a growth co-pilot. Mutinex, make better decisions. Brooke, what's your advice to young people starting out in the PR world?
Find a passion, right? Don't just do it as a job. Like I never thought that I was going to be in the PR for a career. It was a job when I initially started, but I initially started doing PR for like food and so forth. So like French's French fried onions and French's mustard and Hellman's mayonnaise or Best Food mayonnaise. Like that was not my passion. What my passion became was I was passionate about the beginnings of this thing called the consumer internet. So finding what you're passionate about. Maybe that's books, maybe that's marketing, maybe that's, enterprise software, maybe that's the restaurant industry, maybe that's parties and events or Hollywood. But if you find that category that you're passionate about, it becomes something it's not a 9-to-5 job, because PR is constant. You have to constantly be thinking about how to, get a story out or to be strategic and thoughtful. So I tell everybody to find the thing that they're absolutely passionate about category-wise, and then to read and listen to everything.
G'day, Adam.
Brad, how are you?
Mate, I'm good. Have you by any chance read an email, or do you read emails? But if you have you read an email called Pop Culture Mondays?
I normally use Sanskrit, but when I do read emails, I must admit I haven't ever come across that particular email. No.
I absolutely love it. I'm a big fan. It's my cheat code for keeping up with what's going on in culture, knowing all the memes and knowing all the TikToks and things. And I read it religiously every Tuesday morning because it comes out on Mondays in America. So I read it religiously every Tuesday morning.
You sound like another marketer talking about the importance of culture. And so surely it's important, and surely people just get what's happening in the wider world.
Well, it never ceases to amaze me how many marketers don't actually know what's going on in culture. And I just think it's so important for our job and our role. I mean, if you want your brand to be culturally relevant, then you better know what's going on in culture. And as I look around our organisation, I see so many people with customer in their title. Customer insights, customer success, customer experience. And that's all super important. We've got to be customer focused, of course. And it used to be that marketing was the voice of the customer. So I just think now it's not enough just to be the voice of the customer. I think you've got to also understand culture, be the voice of culture in many ways, understand what's going on in culture, have a point of view of what's going on in culture, and importantly, really get what your brand might be able to contribute or how your brand might be able to be relevant within what's going on in culture.
Let's assume I agree with you. Do we have a guest?
What does that mean? You don't?
Do we have a guest who can help us on this journey?
Indeed, we have the author of Pop Culture Mondays, Brooke Hammerling. She's a PR, she probably hate me calling her a veteran, but she's a senior PR executive from the States, and she's got this sort of side hustle called Pop Culture Mondays, which is a fantastic weekly email and podcast that is all about pop culture. I'm really excited. I'm a bit of a fanboy. I'm really excited to meet her. So let's get Brooke on the show, shall we?
Unreal. Sounds good.
Brooke, welcome to Black T-Shirts. Are you wearing a black T-shirt?
I am so sorry. I feel like I've misguided. I'm actually wearing a material that was my Catholic schoolgirl uniform, which is very funny for a Jewish girl. And I have this in a shirt. I don't know why. I felt like being in my old school uniform days.
Do you ever wear black T-shirts? Is that part of
I wear black T-shirts all the time. In fact, being that a New Yorker who moved to LA, I have lost all fashion credibility with my friends because I live in like black T-shirts and black leggings and sneakers all day long, every day. So I thought I would just dress it up a little for you guys.
Oh, no, thanks. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Now, one thing we often ask guests, and I ask guests on the show, is how they stay in touch with culture, because I think it's really important for marketers to know what's going on in culture. And here's my big admission. The way I stay in touch with culture is Pop Culture Mondays, your fabulous newsletter. I'm a massive fan, massive fan. And we're going to come on and talk about that in a minute, but we thought we might just start with, tell us a bit about what you do And
Yeah.
you know, like what's your job and what are you up to?
Well, it's funny because I have some people who introduce me as like, she's a writer of this newsletter. I'm like, that's my side hustle. That is not my job. But it's a long-winded way of how I get to pop culture. But I come from communications. I am straight up from the PR world. I started my career back in the olden days in the 1900s, as the kids say. And when they say that to me, I'm like horrified to say you're right. It was the 1900s, but I started in technology PR in 1996, which is so bananas. But I always use the Malcolm Gladwell analogy of sort of the outliers moment. It was the perfect time. It was the perfect timing, a lot of luck and a lot of hard work, sort of all connected. But I graduated college right at the beginning of the consumer internet, and I was going to become a creative writer. I wanted to go to grad school. I didn't have the privilege to do that. I needed to go right into the workforce after college. And I happened to find a skill set that I was good at, which was public relations. I could tell a story. I got a job and I first started with no email. I had to tell journalists that our server was down and could I fax it to them? That was the olden days. But I moved out to San Francisco shortly thereafter. It was that really exciting time in 97 where the dot-com world was just coming into play. And I always equate it to what I imagine Hollywood was like in the beginning of the movie business, where you had everybody sort of living together and integrated, actors and producers and directors, and everybody was together. My social group in the 90s, in 97, 98, with like the Marks, I remember like Mark Pincus and Mark Benioff and Mark Andreessen. Those were the guys that were very accessible and very normal and not yet crazy. And Larry Ellison, who is still a client to this day, but they all were integrated with journalists, which is hard to get your head around now since this is a group of people who are mistrusting of media. But
Yeah.
they were interacting with their entrepreneurs and venture capitalists and journalists all together in this sort of crazy hodgepodge of this world of the beginning of .com. And I had this really amazing insight being friends with this group of people and friends with media to learn that there was a language barrier, that the journalists and the entrepreneurs were not communicating effectively. They had PR people who were trained from the old school ways of PR, which were sort of, gatekeepers, if you will, and keeping the entrepreneur away from the journalist. And you started to see this is a moment in time when journalists and entrepreneurs were connecting directly. So I learned really not from the agency that I was at, which I would appreciate having a job, but I learned on the ground that there is another language. It was sort of like they were speaking Mandarin, the entrepreneurs and the journalists were speaking Cantonese, and there was no translator. So it was similar language, but not the same. So I then started my own company after being on the agency side and the in-house side called Brew PR, which was really well known in the tech world. We worked with brands. I mean, I launched brands like Sonos and NetSuite, and Brew, we launched companies like SmartThings and Zynga and General Assembly and Maker Studio. I mean, the list goes on and on. And our passion was always about innovation. It didn't have to be whether it was hardware, software, enterprise, consumer, innovation, and a really interesting and curious founder. And Brew grew to be a pretty well-known and big firm and sold it to Freud's, which is a UK company.
Yep.
And I realized that there were challenges that were happening now at that moment that being in an agency managing all my team, but not really being in the thick of it anymore with the day-to-day stuff that founders were being confronted with, I realized that I needed to do something different. And so I left the company that I started and the acquiring company, who were amazing. Freud's is one of the most amazing firms I've ever encountered. But I started this thing. Kara Swisher is a journalist who's just in Australia, by the way, on a book tour. But she and I both had this idea of like sort of staff zero. And not to say that we wouldn't have a team of people, but I wanted to work with my team. I didn't want to be the boss per se and hidden away. I wanted to be rolling up my sleeves and working with founders. And so I launched this, really, it's a communications advisory called The New Thing. It was meant to be just a placeholder name in honor of Michael Lewis for that great book that he wrote, but it stuck. Most of my clients call it TNNT. And it's a small team of us, and we work with companies, big companies like Oracle and Live Nation, and emerging companies here in the US like you wouldn't know, but Modern Animal in the veterinary space, but using technology, Trashy in the sustainability space, EroQ in the quantum space. I mean, literally runs the gamut of types of companies. And we saw that entrepreneurs are really looking for more, I hate to use this word, but bespoke way of storytelling and strategy. It used to be, you guys know from a marketing perspective, it was always an announcement calendar. Like, we're going to announce a new product. We're going to announce a new round of funding. We're going to announce an acquisition. We're going to announce a partnership. And then creating this sort of communications and marketing plans around that. And now, it's less interesting. Media are less interested in covering that stuff. And it's more about the stories in between those moments. And how do you continue building a narrative and telling a story and having a founder be out there, but not too big so they're bigger than the company. It's a really interesting time, especially as the media world has gone from being traditional media to podcasts, maybe by non-traditional folks, and newsletters and YouTube channels and TikToks and everything in between.
And as you think about what you're doing now and PR, well, what role does creativity play in PR? Like, because I do think it's, like you're the first PR person we've had on this show, and it's a show about creativity. But like, how do you think about creativity?
Wow.
Well, I think it's more about creativity now than ever before. Like I just mentioned, it used to be very much out of a playbook. Like, these are the announcements we're going to be making over the next 12 months and build communication strategies around it. Little room for creativity. I mean, maybe you would have an activation at an event or something like that you would work sort of in connection with the marketing team and build it out. But now it's really about coming up with the stories, like creating an entire narrative. And so how do you do that in a way that doesn't, live in a press release? And I have to say, one of the things that makes me cringe about PR are press releases. If you put a gun to my head, I barely could write a press release because I can't think in that third person, like movie phone voice, right? The imaginary man speaking to you like, we're so excited to launch this, da 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 da. It's the opposite of creativity when you see those announcements. And I understand public.
So you would say kill the press release.
No.
You don't use them. You don't like them.
Certainly for I understand why public companies need them. They need it for their shareholders. They need it, and I understand that. But I don't think startups should be relying on press releases. I think they can tell their stories really differently in the first person. There's all these platforms, whether you have Medium, a Substack, a WordPress, whether you do it visually via TikTok. There's so many creative ways to get your point and connect with your audience. Your audience may be consumers. Your audience may be investors. There are just so many more ways to do it than issuing a press release and briefing a bunch of sort of traditional media. You have to think really creatively. And I'm a big believer in PR of quality over quantity. So we all remember those days where you would read the same story about the company, like funding announcement, every single place you look. It was TechCrunch or a Business Insider or Fortune. It would be the same story, just a different writer and maybe a little bit more in depth one place or the other. That's so uninteresting to me. What I'm interested in is finding the right storyteller. That may be a print journalist, that may be a podcaster, and really bringing them into a story, whether it's like about the company itself or about a moment in time. Like a great example is this company Trashy we work with. They have these bags right now only in the US, but they have these very brightly colored bags that look like Starbursts, and you get to buy them, but then you put all of your clothes in them and they get recycled. You're guaranteed that you're keeping it out of landfill, either recycled or upsold, and you get rewarded for it. And the bag itself tells the story. So we can do these events where you put the bags out and people are drawn to it, and then you sort of let the narrative come from that. And then that became a result of the success of that. Good Morning America, a big show. I know you guys have your version there too. Good Morning America in the US was like, this is a great example of sustainability and how people can be good to the environment. Let's tell it visually. And out comes a 5-minute segment on a startup that wouldn't have had that opportunity a few years earlier.
Our version's called Sunrise, and Adam's on it all the time. Just FYI.
Which is very important to establish that.
Yeah.
Famous. I've heard of it.
I don't know.
I don't think it's either or, right? So if you can get a press release and put it in the right tone and just bang it out there, and then find all the other stories as well, I don't think it's either or, unless the press release is stifling creativity, because that's what everyone's kind of reaching for. I've got a question.
There's a formula to them,
And
right?
yeah,
I think that's what you're
There
saying,
is a
Brooke,
formula you have
right?
to kill, though, and
Yeah.
I do think the overly verbose, well, this is exciting, pretending something's more exciting than it is, just makes whoever's receiving that thing think this is bullshit.
Right. We live in a moment of authenticity. Like people, the generations, like Gen Z and certainly Gen Alpha, they see what they can see through this fakeness, right? That's why I hate to bring this up. I don't know if you guys have heard much about it, but the Meghan Markle sort of drama continues. She's just released this Netflix series, and it's it just you watch it and you're like, this is so inauthentic. She's doing it in a fake kitchen. She's trying to act like she doesn't have this whole group of people helping her, and it doesn't feel authentic. And that's the same in a press release when it just feels so contrived.
100%.
Yeah.
So you can make a press release very straightforward. And some traditional media are still like, please send me a press release. I like it in that sort of the format of a document. But it's up to us as communications professionals now to think in tandem with that press release, whether there's a press release or not. But if you are doing it, how can you also have a creative side of it and tell the story in a creative way?
Brooke, in one of your clients is, I think you said, is Live Nation, and about 2 months ago, say, in Australia, 7:30, which is our kind of big, serious kind of documentary or
Current
big, serious
affairs.
current
Usually current
affairs
affairs, yeah.
show, was talking about Live Nation overly dominating and vertically integrating the music industry and basically taking out loads and loads of money out of the music industry and putting them all into Live Nation. And it was a really damning report. But they didn't really say that Live Nation was doing anything illegal or mean or anything. They were just going about doing their business. Do you, when there is something like that, do you think that the client they should be responding? Do you think, what do you do about that? Or
It
do you
really
think no one gives a
depends.
shit?
No, Live Nation is one of the most incredible companies I've ever worked with, and the CEO has been somebody who's taught me some. I can't speak more highly than I speak of Michael Rapino. I don't know about this documentary per se. There's an incredible communications team in Australia that I'm sure was all over it. And this is the dangers of being a dominant player in any industry, is that there's going to be a lot, especially consumer facing, right? I mean, we have the Justice Department was looking at Live Nation, which I obviously can't speak on, but it came as a result of them feeling that Live Nation was responsible for the snafus with the ticketing around Taylor Swift concert and the pricing. And they've been very clear. Live Nation, which owns Ticketmaster, they don't set the ticket prices. This is a urban legend that has just been carried through over and over. The people that set the ticket prices are the artists and the venues. And the Live Nation factor, which is Ticketmaster, is just the platform for which that exists. But when things go wrong or ticket prices are too high, or there is ultimately a tech glitch, or there is the fact that you have bots that come in and buy up all the tickets at the regular prices and then sell them on the secondary for 10x more, that it doesn't matter whose fault it is. Really, it just comes back to the ticket, right? Which is Ticketmaster or Live Nation, which manages it. So what I say to Live Nation is, obviously when it's something that pertains to my purview and I'm looking at, whether they comment, on something publicly or not, it's case by case. They are very, 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 their number one focus are their fans. They are and I know that's hard to believe when you see, they're taking all this money. I don't know about this documentary, but I know that Live Nation is incredibly loved by the crews of these bands. So they have Crew Nation. So all of the crews, like during COVID, making sure that the people where there was no income coming in for these artists, like we think of Beyonce and Taylor, right? These are the top of the top. But for the most part, most musicians are not selling stadiums and arenas. We're talking about clubs and, the working musician who are on buses and vans. And Live Nation is really instrumental in making sure that those people are looked after. And we have as many things as you hear negative, we hear all the positive. But I will say, whether it's Live Nation or another company, we always recommend addressing something head on and being really quick, right? We've seen so many PR disasters where you're like, where is the CEO? Why are they not speaking? Why are they not speaking quickly? Then we had, and on the flip side, you had this awful tragedy with the plane crash in Washington, D.C. That happened, and you had the American Airlines CEO go out immediately, which for me as a communications person, I thought was remarkable. It was like 3 hours later, he does a YouTube, somebody, it wasn't in a professional setting. He wasn't in a jacket or tie. It was late at night. And he was explaining that he and his team were dealing with this and he gave the facts. And yet in this day and age, I thought he would be rewarded for that. This was great. He was quick. He was giving assurances, giving information, getting people the contact info where they needed to go. But he was ripped apart by many people in social media for not being respectful and wearing a tie, or for being too quick to jump in and say something without having all the facts, and not being able to give more information. So in this moment in time, it is hard to please everybody.
Well, exactly. So it's almost impossible, right? Like, I mean, it's
It is almost impossible.
it's such a polarized, right? So how do you think about that? How do you think about the conversation in social media, right? Do you even try to shape that, or I mean, how do you advise these big clients of yours to deal with that?
And it's not just the big companies. I mean, any of these companies, if they have a customer base, it takes one person to be pissed off one day. Something didn't go right? Whether it was the company's fault or not, something didn't go right. Somebody can take to TikTok or Instagram or whatnot and create, and maybe 3 people see it, but maybe it goes viral and 3 million people will see it. And it causes then this spike, especially if something goes viral. You have what we've coined as clout chasers, right? So then you have somebody who people want to get like a little bit of that viral action themselves. So they start making videos on top of videos, especially in TikToks where they can just duet or add to it. So it can happen to any company with an audience, a consumer base, certainly, where people have a voice. And there's something beautiful about that people can share their frustrations or experiences, but it can also blow up. And we talked about my newsletter, but we can get to that later. But a lot of sort of viral moments in this moment in time have been founders of small businesses or celebrities. I think of like Ashton Kutcher or whatnot, where a crisis happens, they try to address it, and the apology or the way they address it becomes bigger than the actual event itself, bigger than the initial crisis, because they didn't handle it correctly, because they were inauthentic, or they seemed to be reading a script, or they seemed to be, resentful of having to do it, and then that backfires and that becomes a bigger story.
And I think there's a tendency with in PR and to respond, and I think that tendency to respond helps keep the PR industry paid, because then they're working out what the response is. So I think there is a financial bias towards action, where I think a lot of the time the client or the person who's in dealing with the ship shouldn't necessarily say anything, because it's so hard to say something right that then doesn't become a story in itself and keeps the story going.
Truly couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I'm sure the big agencies are kept in place, especially crisis comms. Like, the more problems you have, the better for business. I 100% agree. Like, there are so many times when we tell our clients, when something comes up or there's one TikTok or a tweet, just ignore. Let's keep an eye on it, but there is no reason to do the knee-jerk reaction. And especially if it's, we've seen it backfire. Even if it's authentic, even if a CEO like genuinely wants to just respond authentically, that can cause more harm than good. But a lot of times it's very canned. It's very formulaic and scripted, and that just doesn't work no matter what the setting. So I would say 9 times out of 10 we've recommended, certainly to clients, if there's something that bubbles up or somebody's made one comment on an Instagram post, we're like, let's just like put a pin in it.
I reckon it's like you see a little window into the soul of the organisation when they respond, and very often the client shouldn't open
Shut the window.
should shut the window and not let people see inside and see how things are really working. And it's a hard business model as a consultant to sustain that. And so therefore I think crises.
It's different for each company and the ethos of each company, and you know what the goal is ultimately. I mean, one of our clients, Modern Animal. You're always going to have sensitivity. This is private equity has come in and decimated the veterinary business, and it's been really, really hard for economics, for access to veterinarian care in an affordable way. And so a startup like Modern Animal, which is venture backed, not private equity backed, but really putting the human and the pet first. And I'm a very big pet person, so I've gone through all of the different variables with vets and whatnot. But they, and they have now 26 locations. It's an incredible business, but you're going there with sometimes the worst news of your life, right? And then you'll always associate Modern Animal with that. If your dog has been diagnosed with a fatal disease and you have to, then you come out and you're upset or something happens, and you have to navigate that. And how do you do it when you have 100,000 customers? So you really have to play, devil's advocate on that side with the client and just say, listen, there are other people that can speak to them if somebody's having a hard time, if somebody didn't have a great experience. This does not need to be a public discussion. This is something that somebody can work with them on the private so they feel seen, because everybody needs and deserves the right to feel seen and heard. If you're a disgruntled customer, I think somebody should get back to you, but it doesn't need to be the CEO in a public setting.
Brent, you know the reason why I'd make a crap CMO?
Risk and compliance meetings.
Apart from that, it's really, really complicated, and it can also be incredibly slow and tough. For example, like how do you decide how much money to put into brand spending?
Yeah, it's a big decision. And I think we've seen a lot of marketers be really addicted to the drug of performance marketing, which gives you an immediate payback. But I think you really want to be understanding the long-term benefits of brand. You need to measure that over time, and you need to also understand that if you start trading off, spending more on brand, less on performance, you need to know straight away, is that working? Is it delivering? And so you need some sort of model to do that. Without a model, I don't know how you'd even start.
Such as what?
Well, Mutinex. It's the best one out there. It's the best one out there, man. It's SaaS-based. It's really one of the most cutting-edge marketing mix models you can get. And if you have got hard questions that you're trying to confront as a marketer, I would thoroughly recommend a tool like Mutinex.
They're also the sponsor of this show, right?
Yes.
Yeah, excellent.
On Live Nation, they bought a very iconic building near us in St Kilda called the Palais. And the Palais has never been more full or had more live music coming into it for years. And it's fascinating how positive the impact has been. And yet also seeing this...
Do they get the credit for that, though?
The flip
Live
side.
Nation. I don't know. I don't know. So I'm not sure.
You see both sides
Yeah.
on our end. We see both sides. We see people celebrate, and absolutely like what they're doing with venues and bringing old venues back to life and filling them up. They do get the credit. I think to Michael Rapinoe's credit as well, like there's sometimes when he just says, I'm not going to comment. There could be easy to comment and whatnot, but he never wants to throw an artist under the bus, right? And so if it's something where the artist may have set prices, but Ticketmaster is getting the blame, we hold back. It's not, that will ride that course. It's still the artist is number one.
Brent wants to get onto the podcast and the newsletter, and just very quickly. You know what?
No, go. Come on.
No, go ahead, please.
I do. I love the whole world of PR. I hate the whole world of PR. Yeah. But and it's a really creative process, but I don't think people realize that. How do you make decisions? What's going on creatively in your head, whether it's a crisis or whether it's, and I'm just wondering if you can answer such a broad question to say, what's the role of creativity, or where does that creativity emerge when you're...
Yeah. I think it's a great question. And I think, I think for your audience, you need to realize that there are different categories of PR. So, for example, technology, PR is much more around strategy and storytelling. In Hollywood, it's purely publicity, really, or crisis. Like you're either promoting a film and promoting an actor, an actress, or awards, or you're dealing with a crisis. In my industry, in tech, it's much more strategic comms, and I would not say I'm a publicist, because a lot of it is not about getting forward-looking publicity. It's a lot about what's going on behind the sort of world, and some of it's internal communications, how to navigate your internal team and get people motivated and hire. Some of your audience may be venture capitalists, and how to raise money, as well as the customer, whether it's an enterprise customer or consumer customer. So I think, the negatives of PR, I'm fully aware of. I mean, there's a lot of distrust, right? There are a lot of PR people. In any industry, they're bad people. So in PR, you've heard stories where, PR people haven't been truthful, or they hype something up that isn't truthful, or is, disingenuous, or, you look at the Elizabeth Holmes and all of that, all of the publicity that led to that, and it was all smoke and mirrors. So I challenge all communications people to do the work. Like whenever we're looking at taking on a client, we do a very big deep dive in their background, the company background, the investor's background, the leadership background, to understand any red flags. And then working with a founder, for me, it's really important, that is willing to take risks in their storytelling, is willing to sort of be more creative and thoughtful in how to connect with the audience. And again, that audience may be their employees, that audience may be the investors, their audience may be their actual customer. It varies. And so I think in this moment in time, creativity plays the biggest role it ever has, because, I mean, just looking at, not to say that Kamala Harris would have been elected if she had done this, but there is very clear understanding that she could have had less criticism if she had been more flexible in her storytelling, right? Sitting down with a variety of media instead of trying to control it. Because we live in a moment where we can see that. We see through people trying to control the narrative now. And instead, do a 60-minute pod, maybe with somebody who disagrees with you. That makes it even more interesting. And be more open in showing an audience that you're willing to do that. Now, I don't think she had comms people that were pushing her. I think, and just like Meghan Markle, I don't think she has people that say no to her. And so you see that backfire. So if you let the person, that entrepreneur, that celebrity, that political leader dictate to you, and you're just executing upon their demands, and it's always going to be a disaster, in my opinion. And creativity goes to die, because they're not coming at it through the communications lens. They're coming at it from a personal self-agenda lens. And that, as you guys all know, hurts creativity.
So it's really important to be able to say no to your clients.
Yeah, or have a client be comfortable with you pushing back, and you telling them, no, I disagree with you, or I think you should do this. I'm not saying we're going to do everything. They're going to do everything I say, but willing to accept that maybe we have different ideas than them, and that those should be explored.
Now, the way you described strategic comms in tech felt a long way from pop culture. Right? So you said before, it's your side hustle. Obviously it's become pretty big. Tell us about it. How did it start? What was the, how did it start, and how did you get into it?
What's the genesis, and how did we get here? Yeah. It's two very different worlds. Well, I'll start by this. I'll start by saying I don't have kids. I'm 50, but I feel like I'm 22. I live like a 22-year-old in many ways. Like, I absorb a lot of content through social media. I mean, when it started, TikTok wasn't a thing, but I absorbed it through YouTube and Twitter and Instagram, and I listen. Maybe it's through my learning disabilities and my dyslexia, but I do have a very strong connection with kids, and I always have.
Hang on. You've got dyslexia, and you write how many words is it every Monday?
Isn't it crazy?
I
write a lot. It's
Yeah.
a great exercise for that. I have to read it out loud. I use Grammarly. It helps me quite a bit in my world. But you'll see things sometimes. You'll catch it now that I'm dyslexic, where I've inverted things or I say something differently than it is, but you understand where it got to. So, but I've always loved to write, and I had a very deep knowledge of random, unnecessary, useless information. This was during the first Trump administration when all of us were just, again, here we are, but the news was just pummeling us every day, and it was just seemed like bad to worse, and it was pretty grim in the US in particular at that moment in time. But we also had things that were happening so fast on a breakneck speed, and it was two moments that really brought Pop Culture Mondays to life, which was the launch of The Mandalorian on Disney Plus, which had the Baby Yoda, which is why it's the icon in all of my newsletters. And Baby Yoda became a meme like out of control overnight. But you have to remember, Disney was very new then in the streaming world. Not everybody had it. People didn't understand. So kids were going to school, maybe not seeing it, but their friends were talking about Baby Yoda, and it was adorable. And they may not have even had exposure to Star Wars, where they didn't even know the real Yoda. It depends. But parents were being inundated with Baby Yoda, and they didn't know, like very busy people. One of them is a newscaster here, Stephanie Rule, who has a big show on MSNBC. And she was like, the hell is this Baby Yoda? Why are my kids obsessed with Baby Yoda? So I was able to break it down very quickly and say, this is what this is. We don't know. He's not really a baby. He's not Yoda's baby. Like, let me explain the genesis. His real name is Grogu, blah, 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 blah. And then there was another moment in the States where inexplicably at an art festival at Art Basel in Miami, a banana duct taped to a wall, a real banana duct taped to a wall, sold for like hundreds and hundreds
It
of
just
thousands of
resold,
dollars.
right? That was recently
And it just resold. Well,
resold.
assuming
Yeah.
a different banana, but
Yeah.
yes, resold.
Yeah.
The banana goes rotten in a few days. But the fact that it's not like we were just living in a moment of time of absurdity, and still in that moment. But again, it became a meme, and not everybody enters the river at the same time in this sort of world we're in social media. So some people were very well aware of what that was, and other people were like, why is everybody talking about a banana? Why are people sending me images of a banana on a wall? So I was writing a summary to different people at different times, literally copying and pasting one text to one person and pasting it to another. And I finally said to a group of my girlfriends, I said, would you guys like a summary on Mondays? And they said, yes, please. Like, of all the different things that you're hearing, what my kids are saying, why are my kids saying this word? What does it mean? So I started writing it in Outlook. My dyslexia was very, very unhappy with that situation. That did not work. I needed a visual storytelling platform. And at the time, Medium was amazing. I launched it on Medium. It now is dedicated to its own site at popculturemondays.com. But it became a visual storytelling platform that allowed me to get my creativity out in ways that I might not be able to in the PR world. Also show people that like I have my finger on the pulse of the culture of multi-generations, which in turn made my clients, I didn't see this was not the agenda, but my clients loved it. They were like, wow, Brooke really does have her finger on the pulse. And I was still at Brew at the time, but then the new thing, all my clients are subscribers. They loved it. They loved it because it also helped them connect with their kids. Now I broke it down, like my friends learned what Riz was and words before they became mainstream. And they were like, okay, I'm cool with my kids. So it became an advocate for my business in a way. Like it was a very strange secondary point that I didn't ever think about, but it's really grown in popularity, and some of the biggest names in business, CEOs, heads of talent companies and agencies and big brands are all subscribers.
Big
And then
CMOs in Australia subscribing
big
to
CMOs
it.
in Australia. I have a really big base in Australia. I'm really thrilled with that. I have to say some great friendships have come as a result of my writing Pop Culture Mondays. And then I did launch a podcast, which I haven't really spent time marketing. I've been using it as a way to practice my podcasting skills because it's not easy. What you guys do, it's really, really hard. It's not just two people. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of podcasts where people just sit around and talk and shoot the shit, but really to have an effective podcast that's something that people are compelled to listen to over and over again takes a lot of work. And so I felt that I couldn't just rush into it. I wanted to really play around with it in different formats and tell the story differently than a newsletter, as opposed to it just being the newsletter as a pod.
What do you enjoy more? Do you enjoy the newsletter or the podcast? Which one's more fun?
Totally different avenues of my brain are used. So I love them both. I don't have, I have been doing the newsletter more. I find that it's never been a chore. I don't have that fear, and I write it in real time. So I take notes in my notes app, and I bookmark tweets, Instagrams, TikToks, and other things that I see across the week.
And when do you finish it?
It can take me, if I start writing, if I really properly start at 5, then I have to walk the dog and make a coffee. It will take me, I'll probably publish it around 11. So it takes me about 6. It's about a 6-hour process for me.
What I find about having a regular thing to output is it makes you just stay connected. It makes you soak up the world. And it's just and so it's almost like by putting the output forces you to engage. And that's,
I couldn't agree more. It gives me a routine. It also gives me that I have to play a part into this moment. I have to pay attention. I can't get lazy. Another weird thing is I'm a New Yorker, and I moved to Los Angeles during COVID. And the one thing about LA that, I mean, we do have seasons somewhat, but it's really one consistent. Like it's a little cold during the winter.
72 and sunny, as the agency. There's an agency called 72 and sunny, right? Yeah, it's always 72 and sunny.
Yeah, and that's why, I mean, it's completely accurate. And 90% of the time it's 72 and sunny. And so your sense of time gets completely messed up. Whereas in New York, and where you have seasons, you can always think of things seasonally. So for me, I found even more so being in LA, Pop Culture Mondays gives me a real stake in the ground of understanding the course of time. And now I think of things in terms of my newsletter headlines versus seasons and quarters. It's very fun.
Something I'm really passionate about. Marketers need to understand culture, right? And when I think about my organization, there's loads of people with customer in the title. Lots of people looking after customers, customer service, customer experience, customer insights. The only department I think that know about culture, care about culture is marketing, right? And I think if you are building a brand, you really have to understand its place in culture, the impact it can have in culture, what's going on in culture. So
does anyone have culture in the title?
No. Well, only internal culture maybe, but not external culture,
but
right?
It's not a bad thought though, right? To bring the culture in.
Exactly. So I think it's really
You're creating
important.
a new job category right now.
Well,
a new job title.
I
love it.
I just think the old days of marketing is the voice of the customer. I think there's lots of voice of the customer. I think the idea of marketing as the voice of culture, I think is interesting. So I don't know. What do you think about that? How do you see?
I think that's absolutely right. And I think that we talk a lot about marketing in the newsletter. I mean, I'm sure you guys saw the Duolingo marketing campaign where they, right? And that went unbelievably. And I have to say, it was so interesting. The CMO is actually, I just got back from Doha from the Web Summit conference there, and the person who ran that campaign was there. She was fascinating. But, the only reason it worked was because they were listening to all of the audience feedback about Duo, the sort of, icon of Duolingo. And so they're going to murder Duo. And then the big reveal at the end of it, after the campaign started, and it's like, oh my God, Duo's dead, and all these other brands got involved that had their sort of, iconic whatever their spokespeople were talking about the death of Duo. But then all of a sudden you realize that Duo was killed by a Cybertruck. And you realize that at that moment in time, like being able to really connect to what's going to really go viral, but also felt fun and silly and in the moment and fresh. And it just worked so well. But that was as a result of listening to what was being said in the socials about them in that moment.
The people who understand culture and are connected to culture are the PR people. And they are the ones who I think get paid to understand it and also have a natural predisposition to want to soak up all of what's happening in the world. And so in some ways, it's one of the reasons why our agency is so successful is the PR team are so connected to culture and they bring it all into the business, and then everyone gets to benefit.
I love to hear that. And I think that's right. I think, if you're going to be a communications person today, a PR professional today, you do have to have your finger on the pulse of culture. And if you don't have the time to do it, you can just read my newsletter. It's a little clip
So
notes version.
speaking of your newsletter that you and Brent love, we do something here called the pub test, where we take people's work and we put it to people in a pub in Australia, and we ask them what they actually think.
Oh my
so
gosh.
We've taken
It
your...
was a bit hard. We couldn't get them to read your newsletter. That was a bit hard. So instead, we just sort of put the idea of pop culture. Does pop culture pass the pub test in Australia? So this is what people said in the pub test. The pub test is brought to you by Dealey, the insights platform where ideas go to grow.
Do I think pop culture is news? Yeah, I do think pop culture is news. Obviously, some of it is more vain than others, but I mean, what is news really, right?
I think it affects people just as real as news does.
Pop culture may seem so frivolous, like it's a TV show or a song, but it goes far beyond that.
Because if you were accepted into pop culture and you were being embraced by pop culture at the time, then you've passed the pub test of the masses. At least that's what I think.
Pop culture is a major influence in the decisions people make every day.
Good brands lead, average brands follow. I think that's, can be said for lots of things.
I think that pop culture is something that all brands want to be a part of, whether the consumers care or not.
There is more behind headlines and posts and captions that may meet the eye. I think pop culture is a really interesting lens to look at social issues like class or race or gender, and the way it kind of reflects those in different ways.
I never want to hear a mining company telling me that I'm slaying. To be honest, I don't want to hear from a mining company at all, but anyway.
Relatability comes from authenticity and understanding. So the more you understand your consumer and what they consume, the more relatable a brand is.
I think pop culture is the pub test.
Pop culture is almost the ultimate pub test, isn't it really? If you're a brand, pop culture is the pub test.
And yes, I do think pop culture passes the pub test.
What do you reckon?
I honestly I'm not exaggerating. What do you call them? Goose pimples in Australia? I have goosebumps.
Goosebumps?
I have goosebumps, like the little hairs on the back of my neck are standing up. That brings me so much joy. I can't, because I think every single person there had the right point of view, and that is, pop culture is culture right now. Pop culture is the news, brands. I don't want to hear from a mining company is going to be like my T-shirt tagline, because that's true. Like, it's not, you can't just fabricate pop culture, but everything sort of crosses over now.
You would have got a very different response, like maybe 10 years ago, where people, that's sort of, it's trivial, it's celebrities, it's gossip, it's, I think what you just said, I think it's become so sort of integral to society and to, Now, my question, though, is obviously what we're doing there is we're bringing consumers in, right? Like in your work, how often do you do that? How often do you talk with consumers, test with consumers? Or I sort of feel like it's much more driven by your expertise and your sort of knowledge of what's going on in the world, or do you do a lot of consumer work? How does that work in your space?
There's no way you can do what you do without having your finger on the pulse. So you have to talk to people. Not every customer, not all my clients are consumer facing. So that being said, but we did, like with Modern Animal, before we even took them on, we spoke to so many people who either were Modern Animal customers or had other experiences with other veterinary care. I can't have storytelling and not understand what customers' struggles are, frustrations, or successes. Same with enterprise. Like, I remember, we don't represent NetSuite per se now, we work with Oracle, but back when we were launching NetSuite, this was like enterprise software for HR and accounting, right? You're dealing with accounting, how it's very dry initially, but we needed to hear what were small businesses. That was the creative aspect of when we launched NetSuite. What were founders struggling with? They were using QuickBooks to handle their counting, but they were outgrowing it. What were some of the challenges? Being able to pull that together and then story tell back to media. You have to speak to people.
I feel like a lot of PR professionals are more interested in what stakeholders in the media think than what the customer thinks. Is that fair?
I think that's hopefully changing. The people that I work with closely on the communication side definitely have a different point of view and different perspective on who the right audience is. And it's not, that's the problem, right? If I had a client or a potential client and the CEO said, I don't care about anything but our investors, I don't care anything about, the stockholders, obviously we have to care about them. But if you're prioritizing them over your consumer, I can't help you. Like, that is not an agenda I'm willing to get behind. So your audience, the stockholders are important. You have to be transparent. You have to be showing profits and explaining your choices. But your ultimate audience, your ultimate person that you need to be connecting with is the customer, the people paying you for your services.
Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. Brooke, what's your advice to young people starting out in the PR world?
It's a really great question. Find a passion, right? Don't just do it as a job. Like I never thought that I was going to be in the PR for a career. It was a job when I initially started, but I initially started doing PR for like food and so forth. So like French's French fried onions and French's mustard and Hellman's mayonnaise or Best Food mayonnaise. Like, that was not my passion. What my passion became was I was passionate about the beginnings of this thing called the consumer internet. So finding what you're passionate about, maybe that's books, maybe that's marketing, maybe that's, enterprise software, maybe that's the restaurant industry, maybe that's parties and events or Hollywood. But if you find that category that you're passionate about, it becomes something it's not a 9-to-5 job, because PR is a constant. You have to constantly be thinking about how to, get a story out or to be strategic and thoughtful. So I tell everybody to find a thing that they're absolutely passionate about category wise, and then to read and listen to everything. It's so, when journalists to this day, it's not just something that happened when I first started, when somebody will pitch like a journalist something, they're like, have you ever read what I cover? Or have you ever listened to my podcast? Like, that's not what we do. So I encourage everybody, read every article, if you're in technology, I always say go to Tech Memes, skim all the stories, read that, read the Wall Street Journal, read the New York Times, listen to podcasts, find those things to do so you're very, very aware of what is actually being said and written, and it's the most important thing.
If you're looking for insights, don't do a pub test. Go to Ideally.
I thought we didn't believe in research.
We don't believe in bad research.
We don't believe in research that takes forever. It's loads and loads of PowerPoint charts.
Well, because the speed of culture moves in hours, not weeks.
Yeah, so you need research to be fast, you need to be fluid, you need to be co-created, you need everybody to be able to get in on it and get the responses straight away.
100%, and with Ideally, they turn it around overnight with their fantastic digital platform.
You know what I really hate about research?
What's that?
I hate the fact that it takes forever, it's really expensive and clunky, and then it relies on some poor young sod to be speaking the bleeding obvious from the research really enthusiastically. Everyone gets bored and the insight gets lost.
I hate the stale sandwiches.
You're talking about the focus group.
Yeah. Ideally is an insights platform that lets you create with confidence. You can test ideas and innovations overnight and affordably. Visit goideally.com to find out how Ideally can unlock insights for your business.
To me, one of the hard things about PR is the title PR is so sullied, and as soon as PR is incredibly important, and as soon as it gets important and has the ear of a CEO, it gets called strategic comms. So even the industry no longer calls it PR. They go, oh, we're no longer PR, we're strat comms. And to me, that's the worst thing the industry can do, because they're almost embarrassed of the industry that they're in, or the name of it.
I think it's just different. I think, it's funny because I would say I'm in public relations all the time, and I had people say, but you're not, that's not fair to what you do. And I wrestle with it back and forth. I think there's some misunderstandings, and public relations is this big catch-all term for a huge, huge, huge category, which, like I said, could be publicity, which is not communication strategy. It could be crisis. It could be, there are all these number of things. So the strategic comms layer is just a sort of vertical under the public relations.
But it's the most in some ways, it's the most important or the most. It's got the ear of a CEO. So I wish for the industry it was called or more tightly aligned to PR. But I also liked you talking about publicity. That's where the press release belongs.
Correct.
The world of press release belongs in publicity. It's only just I'm just getting. It's like I'm understanding the layers of hierarchy within PR as you're talking. But we're going to have to wrap up. We know when we ask. The show's called Black T-shirts for a reason because in the creative we all wear black T-shirts all the time. We like to ask people to sum up their creative philosophy as a slogan to put on a black T-shirt. So that's what we're going to ask you to do. What is if you had to have a philosophy for creativity to put on a black T-shirt, what would it be? While you're thinking about that for 2 seconds, I am also going to give you a faint promise that we are going to send you this T-shirt. But it's a faint promise because we may not be able to get our shit together to send you the T-shirt, but we hope we do.
I don't really have a great answer for this. It changes when I was thinking about it. But my slogan for Pop Culture Mondays is really, truly my idea of creativity, which is welcome to my brain, ... which could mean so many different things. It's my philosophy of like what goes on in my brain is like, it's very hard to translate, but here I'm trying to show you. Welcome to my brain is sort of my tagline for my creativity.
That's good.
Process.
I like it. But is that cheating?
Cheating how? Because it already exists?
Yeah, is she allowed to do that?
Oh no, did I cheat?
No, you didn't.
We're
You
debating.
did say something earlier. Early in the conversation, you'd said something about, I don't care about your mining company or something. What did you say?
I mean, I'm stealing it from one of your pub people, but they said I don't want a mining company to say slay, and generally I don't want to hear from a mining company at all.
That's a great I don't want a mining company to say slay is a really good T-shirt.
Did they
It's
say
a really
that?
good T-shirt. So
Yeah.
that was the pub cross. So I'll
from the
steal
pub test.
his line, sure. I don't want to
No,
hear
we can't. You can't do that. You can't steal your own line. Can't steal his. I'm going to go a third time here.
You're not going to let Brooke use the line from her own newsletter.
No.
Okay, Brooke, you got to go again on a creative philosophy.
Like all of them exist already. Because I'm thinking of like Apple's one, which is obviously the best one.
I love this. I love torturing our guests like this. Is fun.
No,
I'm sorry.
you know what? I'm going to say, like, and it goes back to the press release that don't follow the rules.
Don't follow the rules. That's a good one. That's a good black
T-shirt. Because the playbook, there is like in PR, people follow the playbook.
Totally.
And I always am
totally.
saying break the rules. Don't
break
follow
the
them.
rules.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That's a good black
We
T-shirt.
may end up sending you 3.
I hope I get 3. 3
Yeah.
T-shirts. All
Yeah.
in extra large, please. Extra large.
I also think that you need to wear the mining T-shirt to like some sort of mining conference or mining company press thing, press junket.
Please don't say slay.
Hey, Brooke, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on our pod and keep doing what you're doing. I don't get till Tuesdays here in Australia, so for me it's Pop Culture Tuesdays. But
I signed up this morning.
did you? Good. See, there you go. Another new reader. Your audience is
That's
growing.
going to give me. I'm going to give a shout out. I'll say happy Monday, my Pop Culture Junkies, and Tuesdays for those of you in Australia and New Zealand. We should have done that before.
We get it the next day. But it's fantastic. It's great what you do, and thanks for doing it. And
thank you guys.
Great to talk to you.
I'm so thrilled, and I can't wait to get more feedback from you on my newsletter. So keep bringing me like feedback. I need it. Bring your audience in.
We will indeed. So thank you, Brooke, and
Good on you, Brooke.
see you later.
Thanks,
Wonderful.
guys.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.
Cheers. At Black T-Shirts, we like ads featuring supermodels. And the most supermodel is the Mutant X market mix model.
Picture this, if you will, a little computer with a little algorithm, and inside that algorithm is a market mix modeling program. That's Mutinex. Hello.
Or if you want to get serious about measuring effectiveness, talk to Mutinex. They're the world's leading SaaS provider of market mix modeling. Marketers, think of it as a growth co-pilot. Mutinex, make better decisions. So, Adam,
Yo.
what'd you think of that?
I thought it was a discussion in two halves. You got the whole conversation around PR and seeing Brooke as a PR practitioner and the role of creativity in that. And then you had PR as an absorber of culture, an absorber and disseminator of culture. On the latter, wonderful. unambiguously fantastic. Isn't it fantastic that she's doing that? And hopefully there's a business model in that, because I think it's what so many organisations need. They need bigger windows to bring culture into the organisation. And I think you're a massive champion of that, and you're talking about that a lot. It's also, there's not a discipline. Like, the only discipline that studies culture is like anthropology or some shit. That's completely irrelevant stuff.
Yeah.
And yet on the pub test, it was like, bring it on. It's the ultimate pub test is culture. And we've got no systematized way of making that live and breathe within organisations.
Yeah.
And again, I've said it before, but within Tinkerbell, it's the PR team who are all over this shit.
Yeah, and it's interesting in corporates, because what tends to happen in corporates is, and you mentioned it in the chat to Brooke, is it's more about the strategic communication role, reputation, helping the CEO, investors. It becomes all of that stuff. Which is a long, long way from pop culture. It's miles away from pop culture, right? So you're getting the benefit of that. Think about. I don't think we get the benefit of it in corporates.
Structurally, who are you relying on to bring culture into your organisation?
Well, definitely my agencies, right? I think
your
agencies.
PR agency or your creative agencies?
My creative agency, my agencies. I don't really
delineate.
Put a demarcation line between them. But I think
do you have a PR agency?
We do have PR agencies we work with at Telstra, but it's not driven by marketing.
Right.
It's not driven by me. It's driven by our corporate communications team. But just coming back to that sort of idea, and I agree with you that the best communication people. Let's not try and put it into a sort of
bucket
silo. Are sponges for culture. I think that's so true. I think that's so true. And what scares me when I talk to a lot of marketers is they just have no idea what's going on in culture. And I think it's so critical. And that point I made earlier around, I think marketing as voice of customer, still important, but there are lots of voices of customer inside organizations. And I think being the voice of culture is a really interesting place for marketers to be.
I reckon you can box it up a little bit more than that, though. So I think I'm going to be really blunt here.
Yeah.
I think creative agencies are good at understanding big, culturally significant tastemakers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
PR agencies are good at understanding. You walk out the door, what's happening today, what's happening in the world, and that's where they thrive. And they're two quite different windows into bringing culture into an organisation. And I think it's that latter one, that practical, all of that stuff, sucking that in. That's how I think a lot of businesses learn to speak and be part of culture in an authentic kind of way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And you are now going to read Pop Culture Mondays, no doubt?
I'll read it, and I'll and it will, hopefully it won't be one of the 30,000 newsletters I subscribe to that I never read and think, oh gosh, I should read that. It's hard, isn't it? They need really good titles on their newsletter. That's what you need. You need a really good copywriter to write the title.
Yeah. Well, and you need great content, right? Which this is. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
But anyway, Adam,
Brent,
until next time.
God bless.